Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Tonight we are starting the fourth segment in the business Masail program at AL-BURHAAN. So going straight into the next section. Last week we covered riba and all those elements of riba that as we know there's two elements of riba. Just a quick recap. Two elements of riba are those riba can occur only on items that are weighed and measured, and secondly the element of it being done in cash or credit. Riba can only be done if it's the same, it can only be done in credit. So if the item is gold for gold, 1 kilo of gold, 1 kilo of gold, if it's done cash, you have no problem. Or 1 kilo of gold in exchange of 1 kilo of gold later, you still have a problem because it's done at a later stage. There are two elements. It must be done immediately, and it must be the items that are being exchanged are items that are weighed or measured. So that's a very quick recap of what we did last week. This week we're going straight into SALAM and ISTISNA. SALAM is a type of contract, and ISTISNA is also a second type of contract. SALAM refers to what we often call forward purchase or forward buying, and this is a concept that is not foreign to Islam. It is actually permitted in Islam. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam sanctioned it, but there are some rules which we'll cover just now. ISTISNA also is a contract which is for those items which are manufactured. So people that are manufacturing goods, making items from raw materials, making them into something, changing the item, then this also is permitted in Islam. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam sanctioned it, but there are also rules and regulations for this. These two items, as we'll see in the very first program that we conducted, we had mentioned the basic rules of every transaction. So the basic rules, we saw the slide, basic rules of every transaction. The item must exist, the item that's being sold must have a value, it must be in the ownership of the seller prior to the sale, it also must be in his possession prior to the sale. It doesn't have to be in his possession at the time of the sale, but it must have entered in his possession prior to him selling it. So even if he owned it, he made the deal, ijab, qabul, offer and acceptance, ownership will transfer, but possession hasn't taken place, he then can't sell it on to a third person. And the few other rules that came after that, the sale must occur instantly, it must be absolute, it mustn't be linked to anything else. Like the example we gave that time, if Russia wins the war, then the sale is concluded. That won't be permissible. It must be instant and absolute. The subject of the sale must be known and identifiable to the buyer. So whatever you're buying, you must know exactly what it is. The item must be known. The price of the item, must be known, and it can't be 100,000 or 200,000. It's one of the two. It must be picked. There must be no conditions. It mustn't be something impermissible to use. For example, pork and wine, those are also impermissible to sell. And the item must be certain, and the time of delivery must be known. And the example you gave there was, if take a lot, you're buying a thing now, and later it will be delivered, but the item delivery date is known, therefore it will be permissible. In SALAM and ISTISNA, this is a few of these rules will be basically SALAM and ISTISNA is exception to these rules, to a few of these rules. So the rules that this is an exception for, SALAM and ISTISNA, three rules don't apply to SALAM and ISTISNA as sanctioned by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So forward purchase or ISTISNA, manufacturing, the item doesn't have to exist at the time of the sale. The sale can be concluded with ijab and qabul, the price known, everything else found in the contract. The contract will be binding, and the item wouldn't be in existence at the time of the sale. So the item must exist. This is an exception this rule doesn't apply to salam and istisna. And the two other rules that don't apply to salam, both salam and istisna, are the ownership of the item doesn't have to be established for the seller prior to the sale. Meaning, if I'm selling it to person A is selling it to person B, the item or the commodity in question, it doesn't have to be owned by the owner prior to the sale, nor does it have to be in the possession of the seller prior to the sale. So if I'm selling it to somebody else, I don't have to own it first, I don't have to have possession of it, I can sell it off to a third person. These only apply to salam and istisna. So if you look at the rules again, the item must exist. This is one rule, that these two contracts are an exception. The exception, that means that from these 9 rules, only 6 of them apply. So the one that doesn't apply is the item must exist. For forward buying, you can still plant the crop, and then once the crop is in existence, you deliver it to the customer. But prior to even planting it, you can sell it off to a third person. So the item doesn't have to exist. Secondly, the item doesn't have to be in the ownership of the seller prior to the sale. And thirdly, the item doesn't have to be in the possession of the seller at the time of the sale. So on this list, it's not in order, but on this list, item 1, 2 and 4, conditions 1, 2 and 4 are not applicable to salam and istisna. So very quickly, if anybody who wants to do a salam contract or a istisna contract, there are a few rules. So very briefly, salam is a sale whereby a seller undertakes to supply specific goods to a buyer at a future date in exchange for an advanced price, fully paid for on the spot. So very simplified. Salam is selling something without for a specific price, without the goods being given over to the buyer at that specific time. He's going to deliver the goods later, and the goods don't have to exist. They don't have to be in his possession. They don't have to be in his ownership. They can exist, but they don't have to be in his possession or ownership also, but they don't have to exist. But the price is known and fully paid for on the spot. This is salam. Well, another name for it, future and forward sales are impermissible in Islam. However, salam is the exception, and if a future sale is conducted by the means of salam, or in the way a salam contract can be executed, then it will be permitted and acceptable in Islam. Salam, very quickly, a very brief history of salam from the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There were traders or farmers who didn't have any cash flow, because they didn't have any money, and they had their farms which they could produce the crop from there. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, even though normally you cannot sell something if it doesn't exist, allowed them to sell off some of the crops in exchange of money immediately, which they would use that money to then plant the crops. And then in the future, when the crops were ready, on that specific date, they'll give part of that crop over to the one that purchased it, and thereby they would get finance for their business. So the conditions, as it was found, the way Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam explained it, and in the way it was conducted in the time of Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala an, a few conditions would then be introduced for the salam contract to be permitted. So firstly, salam, the conditions of salam. The price must be paid for in full at the time of the contract. Remember also, the price must be a specific price. All the other 6 or all the other criteria that we know apply to all other contracts will also apply to salam, except for these 3. Those 3 again, you can look at it in the slide. The existence of the item at the time of the sale, the ownership and the possession for the seller at the time of the sale. They don't have to be there in salam, but everything else does have to be there. The price must be known, the time of delivery must be known. So an added condition for salam, the price must be paid for in full at the time of the contract or agreement. This is because the selling of a debt for a debt is impermissible. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam forbid this from happening. Naha Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam an bay'il kali bil kali. So this is why bay'il kali bil kali means selling a debt for a debt. Normally in a contract you can have a cash price or a credit price. You can sell on credit, and it's permissible to do in Islam, and the price will then be paid at a later stage. However, in this specific contract of salam, the goods are being provided at a later stage. They're not being provided now. It is a debt that is on the seller to provide this specific item, and therefore a debt for a debt can't be occurring because of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's hadith, and bil kali being impermissible according to all four mazahib. Therefore, the price must be immediately paid in a salam contract. It can't be paid at a later stage, otherwise it will be impermissible and the whole contract will be fasid. So in a salam, first condition, the price must be paid immediately, because the goods are a debt on the head of the on the responsibility on the head of the seller to provide those goods. Secondly, the second condition, salam can be effected on those commodities in which the quality and quantity can be specified. Now normally, generally, everything can be, the quality and quantity, you can specify it. You're selling a car, you're selling a house, you can specify, you can go into extreme detail to specify exactly what you want. With regards to fruit and vegetables, those things that are grown, weighed, measured, even though it will look different, it's sold generally on the market by 1 kilo of tomatoes, 1 kilo of onions. So to sell 1 kilo of onions is fine. To specify which type of, like example, you have jam tomatoes, you have round tomatoes. To specify which type you can do. You can say round tomatoes, you can say jam tomatoes. So you can specify the quality and the quantity, therefore you can sell it. What you can't do is those commodities, very, very few commodities, which you cannot specify the quality or quantity, then you will not be able to do salam on these specific items. Example that comes to mind that we saw in a kitab was like precious stones. So if somebody is mining, he's finding these precious stones, getting it, again, this is now items that are not in your possession at the time of the sale. So finding a specific item and having the quality and the specific measurements of the stone specified at the time of the contract, and then being able to deliver that is extremely difficult in today's time, and in the past it will be seen as virtually impossible. Because of that, one example, precious stones, salam wouldn't be able to be done on that, because the specification of the quality and quantity needs to be done to such an extent that any dispute that could come about would be immediately removed by specifying in the contract exactly what you want, and it delivers the delivery of the goods, fulfilling that or not fulfilling that. If it's open-ended, if there's room for dispute, the contract will be null and void. Thirdly, salam cannot be effected by a particular commodity or product of a particular field or farm. So example, just to illustrate, person A tells person B, I'll give you 1 kilo of apples that are grown from this specific tree. So he has one tree, or he has 8 trees on the farm. He says, from this tree, I'll give you 1 kilo of apples. So this will be incorrect, and the whole contract will be impermissible because it is possible that specific tree won't yield any apples at this time. So for the salam contract, he has to be able to get the apples from somewhere else to be able to fulfill. If he expects to grow it from this tree, that's fine. But if he specifies in the contract that it's going to come from this tree, there is a possibility that this tree won't grow and won't give that yield. It might give half, it might give the whole thing, it might give nothing. There is a possibility of not being able to fulfill the contract. The contract needs to be probable that it will be fulfilled, and he putting this restriction on it will make it impermissible. So you're supplying apples, 1 kilo of apples, you know the specification, you know the amount, you know what color apples you want. It can be from any farm. It doesn't have to be specifically from one tree. If you specify that it's from this tree specifically, that will be incorrect, as it is possible that the contract won't be able to be fulfilled. Remember, it needs to be more than probable that the contract will be fulfilled, and we'll come to an extra condition a little later. Number 4, the quality must be specified. One is, remember earlier we said the item that salam can be done on is an item which can be, the quality and quantity can be specified. That's one rule. Secondly, the quality must be specified without any ambiguity. All relevant details of the product must be specified so that it does not lead to a dispute in the future. If it is not done correctly, it will potentially lead to a dispute and the entire contract will become fasid. Remember, if it will cause a rift between two strangers, then we don't allow two brothers to do that contract. Islamically, that contract will be null and void. It needs to be a contract which is basically an arm's length contract where two strangers would not potentially dispute regarding the contract. So everything must be specified. The quality must be specified to such an extent that this will not lead to a dispute at a later stage. Secondly, the quantity must be agreed upon in unequivocal terms according to the normal rules of trade. So that is basically whatever is sold by weight must be weighed, whatever is sold by measure must be measured, whatever is sold by weight can't be sold by measure. So example, you can't sell 1 kilo of rice by the meter. You can't sell 1 meter of cloth and selling it by weight. So the cloth is measured. You go to the tailor, he asks you how many meters you want. You can't tell him one kilo of cloth. It won't be a permissible contract. So whatever is weighed must be weighed, whatever is measured must be measured, and the specification has to be mentioned in the contract adequately to avoid a dispute, for the contract to be valid to begin with. A dispute that comes later, that's one thing, but if it's potentially going to lead to a dispute between two strangers, the contract is null and void. So for salam, these are a few extra conditions. There's two more very quickly. The exact date and place of delivery must be specified in the contract. So at the time of conducting the contract, when the sale is concluded, example, I have a tomato farm and I'm making the tomatoes. Somebody comes and places an order, he pays immediately, and I tell him in 1 month time, exactly 1 month, on 30th of March, the tomatoes will be delivered to you, and I'll deliver it at your place, or you'll have to pick it up from my place. The place of delivery and the date of delivery both have to be mentioned in the contract for the salam to be permissible. Lastly, the salam cannot be effected on items that must be delivered on the spot, as this amounts to interest. So example, gold and silver. So you can't do salam for gold and charge silver, because gold and silver, from what we learned last week, are from those things which riba can occur with. So you can't pay immediately for silver and then I give you gold at a later stage. It will be impermissible, because gold and silver need to be exchanged on the spot. So there's another exception. Like with precious stones, it doesn't apply to a lot of things, but it does apply to a few things, and these are things that salam cannot be contracted on. However, if all these conditions are met, salam will be valid. If not, salam will not be valid. So, just something to be aware of. Salam on items not sold by weight. So items such as eggs, bricks, cloth are not sold by weight. They're counted or they measured. Or if a cloth is sold like a t-shirt, then that cloth is something that is counted. Then it's not sold by weight. Specifically, not sold by weight. Salam can be acceptable in them based on the conditions that we just mentioned now. If it fulfills all those conditions, then we can do a salam contract on them, as long as we describe them adequately, again adequately enough to avoid any dispute at the time of the sale. For example, eggs, they can be specified as to the quality. They can be farm eggs, they can be eggs from battery chickens. This describes the quality, as well as the size of the eggs, large, extra large. In today's time, we know that when we go to the supermarket, we can buy large eggs, extra large eggs, jumbo eggs. The sizes can be specified and can be provided in this day and age. So they must be specified in the contract. Secondly, bricks, the size, the length, the width, whether it's baked, unbaked, the mold of the brick, etc. Everything must be specified in the contract to avoid any dispute. The quality and quantity must be clearly mentioned, and everything must be specified in the contract. Cloth, another example, whether it's silk, whether it's cotton, whether it's coarse or fine silk, all the elements of quality and quantity must be specified in the contract, or the salam contract will not be permissible. So salam contract is almost suited to provide finance for those who want finance provided, and it's a solution that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave, and it's acceptable to Sahaba. They used to do it. So farmers, traders, they used to do the salam of the contract of salam, but with these conditions met. It is evident that salam can be used for financing for farmers and traders if the conditions are met. The price of the commodity may be stipulated at lower than the market price. Lower than the market price would be at the time of delivery, thereby allowing financiers to make a profit, or almost a guaranteed profit. It's not definitely guaranteed, remember, it's probable that it's going to be guaranteed. So the situation that would arise here is that somebody would come to the farmer and he knows tomatoes are being sold. He can take 100 kilos of tomatoes, and in a month's time he'll be able to sell those 100 kilos of tomatoes for 1,000 rand, let's say example, for 1,000 rand. So he'll come and approach the farmer, tell him, I'll give you 800 rand for this amount of tomatoes, and it will be a lower price that is stipulated now, and he's paying it immediately, and in a month's time he'll have a commodity delivered to him which he can sell without waiting. Immediately he can go on the market and sell it and make his profit of 1,000 rand. However, it is possible that he's still going to make a loss, and that's why it's permissible in Islam. It's not guaranteed as a profit, but because he's buying it at a lower price than it is being sold for at the on the market currently, he's probably going to make a profit. So it does come with its issues, obviously. Banks, as we know, are institutions that want to make money without getting involved in any commodity. However, in Islam, this is a foreign concept. We don't have where you make money just from money, giving people loans and getting money from there. This is foreign to Islam. Normally we always make with either trade or some services provided. So you'll make profit from services provided or from buying the commodity, and banks generally don't want to do this. A very simple solution, again it doesn't give you the complete solution, is a parallel salam. As we can see, a parallel salam, it is permissible to enter into a parallel salam contract with a third party. So this refers to one person being a buyer and the seller of the same commodity, but he's selling it to a third party. So example, a salam contract is somebody approaches me and says, I want in 1 month's time, to make it easier, I approach someone and tell him in 1 month's time, I want 1,000 tomatoes, or I want 1,000 kilos of tomatoes. So, let's go into the example. The example will come next. So basically, in this scenario of a parallel salam, it must be borne in mind that each contract is independent of the other contract. So an example of a parallel salam: person A purchases 1,000 bags of wheat from person B on a salam contract to be delivered on the 1st of January. Person A then sells 1,000 bags of wheat to person C, also on a salam contract, to be delivered on the 1st of January 2023. So it's the same day of delivery that person A is purchasing from person B. So the price will have to be set, obviously, and person A can have a lower price offered to person B, where he is purchasing the 1,000 bags, and on the same exact date of delivery, he gets into a contract for 1,000 bags of wheat, selling it to person C. So he buys it from person B, and he sells it to person C, and he can make his profit on that. He can say 1,000 bags of wheat for 800 rand a bag from person B, and he can sell 1,000 bags of wheat to be delivered on the 1st of January for 1,000 rand a bag to person C. Thereby he would make his profit with virtually no risk on him, and he would almost guarantee his profit. But again, in Islam, for there to be a profit, there must be some risk. So the risk here, this is again permissible. However, if for some reason person B fails to deliver this to person A will still be liable for 1,000 bags to be delivered to person C, as both these contracts are independent of one another. So if somebody owes me money, I still owe somebody else money, and if somebody doesn't pay me, I still have to pay somebody else. It's not that I don't have to pay somebody else because my creditors or my debtors didn't pay me. So those people that I owe money, my creditors, I have to pay them whether my debtors pay me or not. So in this case, if everything goes well, immediately he'll take his delivery of his bags of wheat and have it delivered, or arrange for him, the person C, to pick it up from him and immediately secure his profit with very minimal risk. Mitigated risk is not no risk, so we are allowed to mitigate risk to virtually nothing, but we can't remove it completely. This will be impermissible. So secondly, the second type of contract wherein these three rules don't apply is istisna. Istisna refers to manufacturing. This is a manufacturing contract whereby the labor, the raw materials, and the skill set of the manufacturer are exchanged with the customer for a specific price. For this contract, the money does not have to be paid immediately and can be paid at an agreed upon time prior or after the delivery of the item. So with regards to istisna, it's a contract whereby you are manufacturing something on behalf of someone else, or you approaching somebody to manufacture it on your behalf. In this contract, the difference between this and salam, it had to be paid immediately. This one doesn't have to be paid immediately. So in istisna, the item does not have to be paid immediately. So basically for istisna, the item does not have to be paid immediately. It can be paid at an agreed upon time prior to or after the delivery of the item. Secondly, the item must be specified to the point of there being no potential dispute on account of the lack of description. Thirdly, this contract can be cancelled unilaterally prior to the commencement of the manufacturing. So this contract can be cancelled unilaterally. So if you approach someone to make a building for you for istisna, and you did it as an istisna contract, prior to him starting to build or buy the materials, he or you both can unilaterally choose, either one can choose to end the contract prior to work beginning. So even if you all did a contract, it can be cancelled without getting permission from the other partner, as long as work hasn't started on that contract. Fourthly, this contract can be fixed upon the completion of the work, and it's not necessary to fix a time period to say that this item or this commodity will be sold and delivered at a specific date. It can be fixed upon the completion of the work, which is not a known date. It could be 1 year, it could be 1 week, it could be 1 day, it could be 10 years from now, but it can be contracted to be on the completion of the work that the payment will be made, or the contract will be basically you don't have to put a date on the contract. It can be whenever you finish the work. So the differences between istisna and salam: istisna requires manufacturing. So the item of istisna, one very quick point for istisna can only be contracted on those items which require manufacturing. So it cannot be done on fruit, it cannot be done on those items which are grown, it cannot be done on sheep, it cannot be done on a lot of things. Only those items which require manufacturing can istisna be done on. If the item doesn't necessarily have to be manufactured by the person in question, he can subcontract it, just like how he did with a parallel salam. He can have a parallel istisna where he appoints someone else to make a second istisna of the same commodity, and then he can provide it to the person without basically doing anything. The contractor subcontracts, and when the item is ready, he delivers it, and then this person delivers it. So it's not a requirement for the person to do it himself, but it is a requirement on that item to be an item which requires manufacturing. So if the item doesn't require manufacturing, then istisna won't be permissible on it. And if you look on the right hand side, salam can be effected in anything that doesn't require delivery immediately. So like gold and silver, those things it won't be permissible on. But with regards to other things like fruit, like those things which are weighed and measured, even if it doesn't require manufacturing, or it does, salam can be contracted on that specific item. Secondly, istisna does not require immediate payment on that specific item, and salam does require immediate payment, as you can't have the selling of a debt for a debt. The contract of istisna is not a debt upon you, it is an undertaking for you to do a specific work using your materials, your effort, your labor. So it's a manufacturing contract which is upon your head, but the item itself is not being, you can say, owned immediately by the person that is receiving the item. So it doesn't require immediate payment, whereas in salam the contract requires immediate payment for the validity of the contract. Thirdly, istisna can be cancelled unilaterally prior to work starting on that particular item. Salam cannot be cancelled unilaterally once the contract is finalized. So once the contract is done, ijab and qabul takes place, and everything else in the contract has been stipulated accordingly. The contract is binding and cannot be cancelled except if both parties agree. With istisna, it can be cancelled from one side as long as work hasn't started on that item as yet. Lastly, time of delivery is not essential for istisna. Mentioning the time of delivery in the contract as to when it will be done, when it will be ready, is not essential for the contract to occur. It can be done upon the completion of the specific item or the specific work. With regards to salam, mentioning the time of delivery is an essential part of salam, and it will not be a valid contract if the time of delivery is not mentioned for salam. Time of delivery in istisna. As pointed out earlier, the time of delivery does not have to be fixed for the validity of the contract. However, a maximum time period can be set for which if the manufacturer fails to meet this time, the customer will not be forced to pay the agreed price. So if I got into a contract, I told one of my friends, build this house for me, but get it done by the 1st of February. If the first, and the price was obviously mentioned, 1 million rand for this specific house. I showed him a picture, everything is mentioned, all the necessaries for the contract to be valid were done, and I told him if it's not done by the 1st of February, then then the contract is null and void, then this is valid, and I won't have to pay him anything for that for this house. However, that house will belong to him, it won't belong to me. So a maximum time period for the contract to occur can be stipulated. A reduced price for the contract can be negotiated at a later date if that date wasn't met. So example, on the 1st of February it came, he hadn't completed it yet, we can negotiate a new contract wherein I tell him that if it's done by the 1st of March, I'll pay you 100,000 rand less, example, than what we initially discussed. So a reduced price can be negotiated at a later date, and also multiple contracts can be formed with different dates and different prices, so that if one is not met, the second price will apply. So an easier way to understand this is, I can tell a person that if the 1st of February comes, I'll pay you 1 million rand for the house. If you haven't done it by then, by the 1st of March, if it's done then, I'll give you 900,000 rand, and the 1st of April comes, then if it's done by then and not done prior to that, then I'll give you 800,000 rand. So you can stipulate different dates for which different prices will apply, and if the first one is not met, then the second price will apply for istisna. You can, once the date is met, you can also say, I'm not taking the item from you because you haven't met my date, so you can enter into a second contract qiyasan through in that manner. So the difference between ijara and istisna. Ijara means you hire somebody to do a specific work for you. For example, you hire somebody to dye your clothes, you hire somebody to wash your clothes, you hire somebody to build a house for you, and you provide the material for it. So in ijara, basically it's a contract where you're hiring somebody. Even a doctor, if you go to the doctor, it's an ijara contract where you're hiring him for his services, for looking at you and checking you up, etc., and administering the medication to you. So it's an ijara contract. Any hiring of any person for his services is an ijara contract. So the difference between that and istisna is the material is provided by the customer, and only the labor and skill set are provided by the worker and seller in an ijara. And contrary to that, in an istisna, the material, the skill set, and the labor are all sold to the customer by the manufacturer. So ijara we haven't done as yet. We will discuss it most likely next week, but it will be discussed at a later stage, inshallah, in depth. So istisna as a mode of financing. And this is where we'll end today. Any questions will be taken after that. Istisna as a mode of financing. So basically, houses, buildings, roads, stairs, lifts, all these things that require manufacturing can be done through istisna. So because you don't have to pay immediately in istisna, it can be a form of financing. Also, and for the manufacturer's perspective, if he does need the money immediately, it can be done as a form of financing as well, where he gets financing to build the specific item that is required by the client. Payment for istisna can be made in installments from the time of the contract to any future date that the both parties agree upon. So, for example, you started the contract, you told somebody to build it for you on the 1st of January, you expect him to do it by the 1st of January next year. So every month on the 1st, you can give him a payment of some installment. It can be done daily, it can be done weekly, it can also be done with like if a person is building a toilet in your house. So he can do that, where he's providing the materials from his side, and you're paying him for the job, but the material is being provided from his side, and you're paying him, even installments. It's acceptable to be done, and it will be fine to do it. So houses, buildings, roads, lifts, etc., those are things which istisna can be done on, so long as the time of delivery, actually the time of delivery won't have to even be mentioned in this contract. But the item itself must be an item which can be manufactured, which requires manufacturing. So one also important point to mention, this time of payment doesn't have to be also at the time of the contract being ended or the item being delivered. It can even be a later stage than that. So whatever the parties agree upon, so example, you went into a contract 1st of January this year for the item to be delivered or made by June this year, end of June, and it was done, you can still stipulate, as long as both parties agree, that you'll only make payment in September. It's acceptable to do if both parties do agree. So you can pay at any point in time after the contract has been stipulated. You can even pay later. One point to mention is that the payment can also, it doesn't have to be a cash payment, it can also be usufruct. So one thing that, example, if a company goes in, the government wants to build a road, so the company can be appointed to build the road, put a toll on it, and the payment for building the road can even be that this company that built the road then has the capacity or the ability, the capability of renting or taking the toll payments for a specific period, like 1 year or 2 years. So that rental would be the payment for this specific istisna. So that also is permissible to do. It doesn't have to be a payment of cash, it can be a payment of usufruct, and if the parties agree on it, then it will be permissible as long as all the other criteria have been met. So if there are any questions now, we'll take them and then we'll conclude today's session. Any questions from anyone here?
What about manufacturing?
Yeah, so basically the question is, what exactly is manufacturing? Can goods be manufactured? So anything that requires work from you to change it from what it was into something else will be manufacturing. So canned goods will be manufactured because you are placing it, even if the can is made and the goods were made and you simply put it inside, because the item requires manufacturing, it's permissible to sell as an istisna contract. So the work you're doing may be fairly minimal, but it will be istisna. Like a tailor, if a tailor gives you his material, he brings his own material and then he sews it up for you. So that little bit of work that he did to change it from what it was, he didn't just go buy material and give it to you, he changed it a little bit. Obviously it had a big role here, but the work he did was fairly minimal. Any work that is done that requires change of the item will be something that requires change, and therefore it will be valid as a manufacturing contract. Even making shoes may be fairly simple. You need a sole made. It requires a change, therefore it can be an istisna contract, and it can be done with the rules of istisna. As long as everything else is fine, valid in the contract, then you can do an istisna, and then you can do financing through this istisna. Okay, so we'll conclude today's lesson with that, and the next lesson will most likely be on Sunday, but we'll send out a notice, and that will most likely again be the last lesson on this specific topic. So if there are any questions, please email us at ismails@alburhan.org. Al-Burhan is spelled AL-BURHAAN.org. So feel free to drop us a message, and we'll try and reply to you. Again, next week is the last lesson, so if there are any questions on anything else that has been discussed in the past, in the previous lessons, please try and send us those messages through by Saturday so that we can reply to them on the last lesson. آخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين.